Welcome to Lingua Latina tutorials with Mr. K, Pensum D. This video explains the new grammar and syntax found in Chapter 28 of the Lingua Latina per se Illustrata series. It is meant to accompany the Latina Disco text available from Focus Bookstore and the Pensum D worksheets available from 50%Latin.blogspot.com or christianlanguage.com. Let's get into the text and look at the new grammar and syntax in this chapter. Turn with me to line number 8. Here we have ut tempestas mare tranquillum turbavit, ita verba ludiae animum medi turbaverunt. So as the storm stirred up the peaceful sea, thus the words of Lydia stirred up Medus's spirit. Here we have ut, which we saw early in the Lingua Latina series, and then recently we've seen it used with subjunctives to show indirect commands or clauses of demanding and of taking care that something happened. But here we see that ut is not with a subjunctive. Ut plus turbavit, just a regular perfect indicative. So sometimes ut, when it's just with an indicative, means like or as. It's just a conjunction, and it does not show a purpose or result clause like you're going to see, or a indirect command clause. This chapter has two new ut clauses that you're going to learn, and so we need to be able to distinguish just the regular everyday ut with an indicative from the ut plus subjunctives. The first use of this new kind of ut in this chapter, another ut clause besides the indirect commands we've looked at, we find this in line 35. Let's go to line 35. And here we have in Judaea, Jesus non solum faciebat ut caeci viderent, surdi audirent, muti loquerentur, verum etiam verbis efficiebat, ut mortui surgerent et ambularent. So Lydia says, of course he's able. In Judea, Jesus not only was effecting or bringing it about that the blind could see, that the deaf could hear, and that the mutes could speak, but also he was bringing about with his words that the dead rise and walk. So here we have a new form, viderent, plus ut. So it's an ut subjunctive clause, but instead of videant, which would be our present subjunctive, like you saw in the last chapter, we get ut viderent. This is the imperfect subjunctive. And the form of the imperfect subjunctive, I think the easiest way to remember this is it looks like the infinitive, videre, plus the personal endings, mst, mus, tis, nt, for the present. And for the passive, it's the infinitive, videre, plus the passive personal endings, are, ris, tur, mor, mini, untur. So if we were going to conjugate videre to see in the imperfect subjunctive, we would take videre, our infinitive, and add mst, mus, tis, nt, so it would conjugate as viderem, videres, videret, videremus, videretis, viderent. And so what kind of an ut clause do we have here? In Judea, Jesus not only was bringing it about that the blind see. This is the same kind of clause we saw in the last chapter, where ut indicates an indirect command. He was the idea here is that he wasn't only bringing it about or ordering that it happen. So this form of videre, why do we need this imperfect subjunctive? The reason that we have imperfect instead of present is what we call in Latin the sequence of tenses. When you have an imperfect or a past tense verb, doesn't have to be imperfect, but any past tense verb before the ut, you need a past tense subjunctive after the ut. So if we have faciebat, imperfect, was bringing it about, so that then we need an imperfect subjunctive or another past tense subjunctive afterward. So we can't have a present tense subjunctive here because of faciebat. In line 35, we also see audirent, a fourth conjugation verb, audira, to hear. So if we were going to conjugate this, we would have the infinitive audira plus mst mustis nt. So audirem, audires, audiret, audiremus, audiretis, audirent. This specific form is third person plural, imperfect subjunctive active, and it's in the same syntax as viderent, parallel to viderent. So the next feature, or the next word in this list, we have loquerentur. Loquerentur is passive in form. We see untur, our passive third person plural ending. But since loqui is deponent, we translate it actively so that the mutes speak. And notice that loquerentur is just aristur murmini untur added to what would be the infinitive form if this deponent had an active system. So loquer, if we were going to conjugate this fully, we would have loquerer, loquereris, loqueretur, loqueremur, loqueremini, and loquerentur. So you should write those down, practice those new forms for the subjunctive, the imperfect subjunctive. And the next new feature that we have to look at is in line 57. Let's go ahead to line 57, and we have medus qui legere non didicit, ludiae librum redit, eamque rogat, ut aliquid sibi legat. So medus, who hasn't learned how to read, hands over or returns Lydia's book and asks her to read something to him. So sibi here, what part of speech is sibi? Sibi is a reflexive pronoun. Reflexive pronouns are pronouns that reflect back on their subject. So to know who sibi is referring to, we need to look at our subject. And here we have medus. So medus, who hadn't learned how to read, asks her to do this so that she read something to him. Sibi could also be to her, it could be to it could be to them. Sibi can represent all of those different singulars and plurals and masculine and feminine forms. The only way you know who it's referring to is by looking back at the subject. So this sibi is our dative, singular, masculine reflexive pronoun. But like I said, it could be dative, plural. It could be masculine or feminine. You only know by the subject who it's referring back to. The next new feature is similar in that it's reflexive. Let's look at line 66, where we have Audi igitur quod scriptum est de Jairo principe quodam Judaeorum qui Iesum rogavit ut filiam suam mortuam suscitaret. Okay, so Lydia says, therefore listen to what was written about Jairus, a certain leader of the Jews who asked Jesus that he raise up his dead daughter. So here the reflexive pronoun is a reflexive possessive pronoun that we translate as his, her, or its own, and or it could even be their own. It could be plural as well. It's the reason that we put own on the end of it is because it is reflexive. It's reflecting back on the subject. So to know who is doing the ownership here, we need to look at who is the subject of the sentence. And we have listen to what's said about Jairus, a certain chieftain of the Jews. Here we have who asked Jesus. The subject is Jairus. This relative pronoun reflects back on him. who, Jairus, asked Jesus to raise up suam filiam, his daughter. Notice that the form here, suam, is feminine. It has a dual loyalty. It has a loyalty back to Jairus, the subject. So that's why we translate as his daughter. It also grammatically has a loyalty to filiam. So the form here for suam is accusative singular feminine, matching filiam. It's important to remember the dual loyalty of reflexive possessive pronouns, and also to translate them remembering that they reflect on the subject of the sentence. In line 87, we have another new feature. And let's go ahead to that. And we have here nam, we'll start here at nam at 85. Nam tres dii, Neptunus, Jupiter, Pluto, mundum universum, ita inter se diviserunt, ut Jupiter rex caeli esset. Rex maris esset. Neptunus, Pluto, autem regnare, etc. So we have here that for three gods, tres dii, Neptune, Jupiter, and Pluto, divided the whole world among themselves, ita, in such a way, okay, this is very important here, this ita, in such a way that, as a result, Jupiter was the king of heaven, the king of the sea was Neptune, and Pluto reigned over the underworld. This ut clause, ut esset, is what we call a result clause. So now you've met the ut indirect command, or sometimes those are called jussive noun clauses because jussive means command, so commanding noun clauses. And now you've met another ut clause that's called result. To get a result clause, you have to have something in the first part of the sentence that indicates a degree. In such a way, or tom. Often it's tom or quam. It's so great that, as a result, something occurs. Esset in form is from sum esse, to be, the verb, the to be verb. And remember that our imperfect subjunctive is formed on the infinitive. So we have our mst, mustis, and t endings added to the infinitive, which is esse in the case of sum. So sm, esses, esset, esse, mus, essetis, essent are the forms of the imperfect subjunctive of sum. So that Jupiter was the king of the gods, king of heaven. The why this tense? Why do we need an imperfect? Why can't we have the present subjunctive of sum, which would be sit? And the reason is that if you look before the ut, we have diviserunt. We have a perfect indicative, diviserunt. They divided it up. They divided it up so that, and then we need an imperfect, or we need a past tense subjunctive after the ut. Think of it like an equation. Past tense before the ut, we need past tense after the ut. In line 91, we have, we'll start with line 90. Medus says, num quis tam stultus est, ut ista vera esse credat. So Medus says, surely there isn't anyone so stupid that they would believe those things are true. So here we have credat, third person singular, subjunctive, but it's a present subjunctive active. And it's, again, as we saw before, it is we have tom. It's going to be a result clause. Nobody is so stupid that, as a result, he would believe that those things are true. So why is credat present? Look before the ut to find the answer, and you see est, present tense of sum. Is so stupid that, as a result, he believes, present tense, present. The next new feature is in line 103. And here we have, starting from, actually we're going to go back because we want to start with veni. So at ipse ait, so line 101, veni et descendens Petrus de navicula ambulabat super aquam, ut veniret ad Iesum. So, but he himself says, come on, and he himself says, come, this is Jesus, and Peter, getting down out of the boat, was walking on top of the water in order to come to Jesus. Here we have an ut plus a subjunctive, the third person singular imperfect subjunctive active of venire, to come. Why is this imperfect? Because if you look before the ut, you have ambulabat, you have another past tense verb before the ut. So now the question here is, what kind of an ut clause is this? Is it an indirect command? Is he commanding something? He commands that Peter come to Jesus. No, it says he was walking on the water in order to come to Jesus, not because he was commanded. And also, is it a result? He did this so well that as a result he came to Jesus? No. What this is called is a purpose clause. It's the third ut clause we've learned so far. And so Peter was walking on the water in order to, and that's one way you could identify an ut purpose clause, is if you could translate it in that way, in order to do this, or in order that he not do this, if you had ne here. Okay, so the next new feature is in line 110. Go ahead to the beginning of lesson 3 here, where the gubernator qui medum attentum videt says, num tu inquitam stultus es, ut haec credas, and then mihi nemo persuadebit hominem super mare ambulare posse. So surely you are not so stupid that you believe these things. Nobody will persuade me, nemo persuadebit mihi, that a person is able to walk on top of the water, on top of the sea. The form of mihi here, the dative from ego, why is it dative? It's an object of persuadebit. It's because persuadera, we see in the margin, persuadera persuasisse, to persuade and to have persuaded, takes the dative. You persuade somebody in the dative case. That's why you have mihi. And remember that there's certain verbs that do this, and you have to learn those verbs as we go along. Memorize the verbs that take the dative case as their objects. What is unusual about persuadebit is that it has two possible constructions afterward. Here we have the accusative subject infinitive main verb. Nobody will persuade me that, as indirect statement, a person is able to walk. But persuadebit can also take an ut clause. Nobody will be able to persuade me. Let's take a look at an ut clause in line 174, where we have nec promissi solis medus mihi persuasit ut secum venirem. So not by promises alone did Medus persuade me to come with him. Here we have ut plus the first person singular present and subjunctive active from venire, and so you see that persuasit can both take both the accusative and accusative infinitive construction, and it can take an ut clause, which in this case persuaded it's an indirect, what we would call an indirect command. So let's go back and look at that at 111, where it says nobody will be able to persuade me that a man is able to walk. Remember that posse, the verb to be able, from possum, posse, patuisse. I am able to be able and to have been able. The infinitive in the accusative infinitive construction. The next new feature is in line 133. And here we have, we'll need to start with, well, we need to get down here. So we'll start all the way up at tempestas quidem desiit, sed multa alia pericula nobis impendent, ut saxa quibus naves franguntur, voragenes in quas naves merguntur, praedones maritimi qui naves persecuuntur, ut merces et pecuniam rapiant nautasque occidant. Oh, long sentence. So we have this. Indeed, the storm has stopped, but many other dangers threaten us, like the rocks on which ships are shattered, the whirlpools into which ships are submerged, the sea pirates who pursue ships in order to grab their merchandise and money and kill their sailors. So here we have rapiant, a couple of an ut clause with a couple of subjunctives, ut plus rapiant and ut plus occidant. Ut governs both of those, so that they could see. So these are the pirates, the sea pirates, who pursue. Persequuntur, from sequor sequi, persequi, to pursue. Notice it's a deponent verb, so it's translated actively. They pursue ships in order to grab their goods and their money. So why do we have a present third person plural subjunctive here? We have a present subjunctive because before the ut, well, it's in an ut clause, that's why you have subjunctive. What kind of ut clause? They follow the ships in order to. So you should recognize that when you have in order to do this thing, this is an ut purpose clause, in order to grab their goods. Why is it present? Because we have a present verb in front of the ut. Persequuntur. In line 149, we have gubernator who says, intra sex dies ut spero vel potius octo. So the question that made us ask is, when will we get there? And the helmsman says, within 6 days, as I hope, or rather within 8 days. Ut spero. What is the mood of spero? Spero is just your regular indicative verb from sperare, to hope. And ut spero, as I hope. Notice that we have an ut, but it's not a ut clause where you have ut plus subjunctive. You have just ut plus indicative. So we translate this ut as or like. So within 6 days, as I hope. The next new feature is in line 163. If you look down here, we have we had to start on 161. Said erie vi la fugi ut verbera vitarem atque ut amicam meam viderem ac semper cum ea essem. So, but yesterday I fled from home to avoid beatings and to see my girlfriend and to always be with her. So here we have SM. And so what is the form of SM? You saw before esset. This is our imperfect subjunctive from esset, to be, adding MST mus to so first person singular, imperfect subjunctive active. And why is it subjunctive? There must be a trigger for this subjunctive. And the trigger here we see is an ut, so that I see my girlfriend and always be with her. Why do we have imperfect after the ut? We would expect before the ut to find an imperfect main verb, and we do see that. We see yesterday I fugi, I ran away, the past tense from fugera. So that explains our form of SM. The next new feature, we've already seen this, but there are a couple of things to point out, and it's in line 174. So go back to 174 where we had nec promissis solis medus mihi persuasit ut secum venirem. So the form of venirem, by now you should be getting pretty good at these. Venirem, from venira, to come. It's an imperfect subjunctive, venirem, first person, singular. And why do we have an imperfect subjunctive? It's in an ut clause. It's imperfect because persuasit is past tense. He persuaded me to do this. So we have to have a past tense after the ut. And why do we have, and what kind of an ut clause is it? He persuaded me to do this. It's indirect command, or a command, It's the subjunctive of postulandi and curandi, of demanding and of taking care that something happened. In the same sentence we have secum. What part of speech is secum? Secum is actually just cum, the preposition, combined with se, which is another reflexive pronoun. And remember from reflexive pronoun, the reflexive pronoun sibi that we saw before, that was a dative form of the reflexive pronoun. This is the ablative form of the reflexive pronoun, which has the same form as the accusative, se. And remember that reflexives have to reflect back on their subject. So this say by itself, if you looked at it without any reference or any context, could be himself, herself, or themselves. So you wouldn't know if it's masculine, feminine, or neuter, or plural. Here the subject, though, tells us that Medus persuaded me. So Medus is the subject, persuaded me to come with, and so say has to be referring back to Medus. Come with him. So those are all the new features in chapter 28. Thank you for listening.